They did not demand a warrior. They demanded a corpse, polished, ceremonially defeated, and returned within the hour so the paperwork could close before the Compact's quarterly tribunal. The Kalasar Compact had not lost a trial by champion in 3,040 years, and they had stopped expecting to. What they had not accounted for was a species that would rather read the rules than fight by them. The formal challenge arrived as a single data packet, 41 pages long, written in the layered diplomatic register, the compact reserved for species it did not expect to survive the century. Trial by champion, invoked under Founding Charter Article 12, subsection Settlement of Contested Sovereignty through Single Combat. Humanity is permitted one champion. The champion will be received with full ceremonial honors regardless of outcome. The compact extends its sympathies in advance. Attached to the packet was a single image. The compact's reigning champion, a genetically layered war organism called Kesvorn, undefeated across 181 recorded trials, each one ending the same recorded way. A duration, a name, a footnote reading concession accepted. The herald appeared on the delegation's screen 40 minutes later. Vethry's Dhamma smiled the way a species smiles when it has learned the expression from a manual rather than from feeling it, and spoke in English so precise it had no accent at all, because it had never had one to lose. "We have selected the century's kindest terms for your species' inevitable concession," he said. "Your champion will not suffer, that much I promise you personally." There was a long silence in the Situation Room afterward. Nobody spoke for 11 seconds, because 11 seconds is how long it takes a room full of admirals to understand they have already lost, and are only now being told the manner of it. Then a woman in the back who had said nothing in the entire meeting raised her hand like she was in a lecture hall instead of a war room. Dr. Alina Voss was the chief archivist of the Interstellar Records Office, a position that existed because someone, 11 years earlier, had decided humanity's first contact protocols should be cataloged rather than simply remembered. She had correctly predicted the collapse of 3 separate diplomatic frameworks before they collapsed, using nothing but digitized fragments of documents other departments had filed and forgotten. She did not raise her hand to volunteer as a champion. She raised it to ask a question nobody in the room had thought to ask. "The Compact's champion has never lost a fight," she said. "I'd like to know if it's ever lost an argument." Nobody answered her because nobody knew. That was the entire point. Marcus Adami, comparative xenolinguist, had spent 4 years arguing that the Compact's founding-era dialect had been mistranslated in 11 places and had been formally reprimanded twice for saying so at conferences. He found the discrepancy on the third night in the original charter text rather than the modern annotated translation everyone else used. He went still. He read the same 3 lines a 4th time before he said anything. "The word for champion isn't one word," he said. "It's Keithir. It has 2 registers. In the modern register, it means a warrior body. In the founding-era register, the one this exact document is written in, it means something closer to vessel of the house. Not a person, a ship." He did not explain further because he did not need to. Everyone in the room understood exactly what he was suggesting, and nobody wanted to say it first. Dr. Priya Nair, legal historian specializing in pre-compact treaty law, found the precedent because she was the only person still reading footnotes at 2 in the morning. She sat down on the archive floor when she found it because her legs had stopped being useful for standing. 2,600 years ago, she said, a species called the Usharvel fought a trial they were certain to lose. They sent an unmanned transport vessel instead of a body. They won on the technicality because the charter never specified a champion had to be alive. The Compact's authors were embarrassed enough that they quietly started assuming personal combat in every trial since, but they never revoked the clause. They just stopped mentioning it. 3,000 years of unbroken victories, and no one currently alive on either side of the war room had ever needed to check whether the rule had actually changed. Tomasz Kowalski, fleet architect, formerly of a shipbuilding firm that had gone bankrupt twice, each time for underestimating exactly how cheap he could make something structurally sound, was the one who worked out that the tonnage and classification requirements for a champion vessel hadn't been updated in 2,600 years. He laughed once quietly when he found it, then he stopped laughing. "Any registered civilian vessel above minimum mass qualifies," he said. "We've got one sitting in dry dock right now mid-decommission, the Meridian's Rest. 40 years old, structurally sound, Technically, legally, absolutely eligible. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than the one Vethrisdama had left behind. The compact intercepted the vessel registration filing 9 hours after it was submitted, because the compact read everything humanity filed, the same way humanity had finally started reading everything the compact had written. The response was not the polished diplomatic channel. It was formal, furious in the careful, bureaucratic way 3,000-year-old institutions are furious, and it arrived with a deadline. The reinterpretation on file constitutes an insult to 3,000 years of combat tradition. Humanity has 72 hours to withdraw the filing. Failure to withdraw will result in formal designation as oath-breakers, terminating all diplomatic recognition. Voss read it twice, then she looked at Kowalski. How fast can the Meridian's rest be ready? For a funeral or a fight? Both, probably. He did not answer with words. He answered by standing up and leaving the room. The deadline expired at 04, 0 station time. The ossuary of the Unbeaten dropped out of transit 11 minutes later, on schedule, exactly as 3,000 years of unbroken confidence had taught it to be. The Meridian's rest carried no crew, because the charter never required one, and no weapons, because the same ancient clause that stripped modern shielding from both dual vessels stripped modern armament along with it. What it carried instead was decoy emitters, chaff canisters older than half the engineers who loaded them, and 11 precisely tuned burst thrusters bolted on in the last 60 hours. The compact champion opened with 3 volleys at the decoy pattern and hit nothing because the pattern was random on purpose. By the 4th volley, it had learned the randomness. It adjusted. It nearly hit. Humanity's ship switched to manual burst timing at that exact moment, a full second before any automated system would have reacted, because Kowalski was flying it by hand from a console 800 kilometers away and had been waiting for exactly that adjustment. 9 minutes and 40 seconds after the first shot, the ossuary of the Unbeaten took a grappling line through its unshielded drive housing. A line, not a weapon, because the ancient clause allowed grappling and said nothing about disabling, and went dark. One compact escort held position the entire battle and never fired. It was a registry survey vessel, not a combatant, and the charter's own protections. The ones humanity was standing on forbade striking a non-party craft. Voss gave the order to let it go untouched. It left without being told twice. The official concession arrived 4 hours later through the usual polished channel in the usual devastating bureaucratic prose. Voss barely read it. The second transmission came through a private line, unlisted, 3 minutes after the first. There was silence before Vethrisdama spoke at all, 6 full seconds of it, which for a species that scripted every syllable it had ever spoken to humans was its own kind of confession. This was audacious, he said finally. I assumed a champion needed a body because every champion I have ever known has had one. I was wrong about that. I have been wrong about it for 3,000 years and no one thought to check. He did not apologize for the war. He apologized for the assumption. Voss understood that this was, for him, the harder thing to say. By the time the transmission ended, she was already 3 pages into a new filing, a border dispute belonging to a human colony 2 systems over, still governed by the same compact charter, still full of clauses nobody currently alive had bothered to read twice. I've been meaning to get to this one since month 2, she said, to no one in particular, and kept reading.